Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast, where today we are joined by Ben. How are you, Ben?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Good.
Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Lovely to see you. And Ben and I are going to be doing our best to get to the bottom of where Spurs currently sit from a PSR perspective and how much we may have to spend this window based on the figures from last season. But we'll also be explaining a bit about how the revenue from Europe, i.e. the Champions League or Europa League, impacts that, the stadium and other revenue streams that go around Tottenham. So by the end of this podcast, you should have a good understanding, from our perspective at least, of how we read the Tottenham financial results and where that leaves us in terms of our spending ability. And this will all tie into as well why the club is looking at external investment, because PSR limits do not equal how much money you have ready to spend. They're just how much you are allowed to spend. But Ben, if you're happy, I'll probably just quickly clarify my understanding of what PSR is and how the rules are changing. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, and then we'll dive into Spurs' kind of health and last year's figures in terms of I think as we'll just go through is kind of like our revenue, how it compares to our rivals, etc., etc.
Yeah, sounds good.
But my understanding of PSR, so historically, there were rules whereby you were allowed to invest, your owners were allowed to invest up to £30 million per season on top of your own self-generating revenue as a club to go towards transfers, wages, and agent fees. So you were effectively allowed to lose £30 million a year on top of what you were generating yourself. And then there was an additional £5 million per season, correct me if I'm wrong, for what was that for again?
The 5 million is the default that you're allowed to lose, and then if your owners are willing to top it up, you can add another 30 million on top to take you to 100 and over a 3-year period.
Got it. Okay, so that's what it said. So you could effectively lose £105 million over a 3-year period as a spending kind of limit, as it were, onto those topics of wages and transfers and agent fees. But the rules have started to shift now, and there are some allowances in there just before we get there. So when, I think this is relevant now, because you're seeing a lot of people have this debate now around, we're stifling ambition. You're not allowed letting your owners spend what they could spend, and that's not good for competition in the Premier League. And that's obviously Man City and Chelsea's argument, predominantly, and Newcastle's argument. But other people are saying, no, it reduces the gap between teams in certain areas of the table because it slows down their growth and ability to use that money. But these owners are allowed to invest unlimited amounts on infrastructure that generates more revenue. So they can put, like Spurs did, £1 billion into a stadium. They can go build the best youth facilities in the world, they build the best training facilities in the world. They can build hotels, skyscrapers, luxury holiday resorts, whatever they want.
Yeah.
But that's a long-term way to increase your revenue. So they want you to be able to burn their cash more quickly, but they're allowed to do that. So that just sets the scene a bit. And the rules are changing now to be, you can spend 70% of your revenue on transfer, wages, and agents if you're in Europe, and 80% if you're outside of Europe. So that puts Spurs into being able to spend 70% of their revenue, transfer, wages, and agents. Is that all right so far?
Yes, pretty good summary. Yeah, as you say, the PSR, there's nothing to stop people spending all the money they want on infrastructure and youth facilities, and they can hoover up youth prospects as well. They can sign all the best, 17-year-olds they want. 2-3 years' time, they can sell them on. So as you say, there's nothing stopping them except for patience. Basically, they want it now. They want to be able to just spaff it all onto players and wages immediately, rather than allow their revenues to catch up. Even with these, slightly questionable affiliated sponsorship deals that they're sort of stuffing in the back door as well to give themselves some extra cash, they're still impatient. Yeah.
And that's important to highlight as well, what you mentioned there, the affiliated sponsorship bits, because a lot of people, you see it on social media, especially when I see Everton fans complaining about FFP, I'm like, you're not even impacted by FFP. And this is important to as well. There's FFP and there's PSR. Very similar rules owned by different and implemented by different bodies. PSR is the EFL, English Football League's financial regulations. FFP is UEFA. So you're only bound by UEFA's rules if you're playing in the Europa League, Champions League, or Europa Conference League, which Everton are not. So they're not even impacted by FFP, but they're often pointing the finger at FFP as the problem. So Everton fans, you are impacted by PSR, not FFP. I just wanted to clarify that. And Man City are not in trouble for failing FFP or PSR. They're in trouble for falsifying or exaggerating sponsorship values to ensure they complied with FFP and PSR? Because technically they complied, it's just whether they complied legally through that process.
It, yeah. And then you've got Chelsea as well paying people off the books so that they're, doesn't get included at all in their figures. So they're sort of sending offside payments through shell companies and things like that, so that it's not counted as football spend, but it technically was football spend. So yeah, you've got all the loopholes, or not technically loopholes, but you've got the breaking of the rules that have happened around FFP, as well as just people that have breached, like Forest and Everton.
Yeah.
So then again, the FFP, PSR. So, yeah.
And you mentioned something earlier I just wanted to clarify on. You said they can spend as much as they want on youth players. Is there a loophole around there as well?
So they count that as good spending. The women's side of the club. So any of the female teams, they can spend as much as they want on that. They can spend as much as they want on the academy and the players they stock it with. I can't think what the age limit is now for that. It might be 18, but it could be 21. But I think it's 18 or below. If you buy. You can buy them for as much as you want, which is what Chelsea have obviously been doing as well with the South Americans. You can put all of those in your academy, and in 3 years' time, if they're worth how much money, you can sell them on, and that can go towards your revenue. So yeah, there are loopholes, if you like, or ways that you can boost your revenue. As you said, you can spend on hotels. Which is what we're doing. You can go and buy a stadium and not have £1 billion worth of debt to do it. So they could easily do these things. It's just that they don't want to wait.
And they don't want to wait 10 years for a 16-year-old to turn 26 and be the next X player. They want it now. But
exactly.
So technically, we're slightly off topic in a way, but Spurs related. Technically, then someone like Bergvall, would they not be under
Bergvall, I'd have to check what the age cutoff is for counting as an academy prospect. I think they have to come into your academy. So there might be a couple of lines around that as well. But yeah, as long as they're young enough, then it doesn't count towards your spend, because it's counted as good football investment rather than just pure spending on players and wages.
Interesting. Okay. So I'll move back on track to topic then from our original agenda then, Ben. Should we start by talking a bit about where Tottenham sit from a health position in terms of the figures they announced for 2022 and 2023? And like how that maybe compares to rivals, and what portion of our income is coming from things like Europe versus the stadium and non-football related events. Because I think this is important to help everyone make sure we understand why we're letting Beyonce use the stadium and why we want Taylor Swift in there next, whoever else it is. We want it full every day of the year, right? We're not using it for football. But some people, I think, have a negative connotation that this is taking the heart and soul away from the football club. But I think by going over this overview of the figures and how the stadium fits in, it's going to set some good context to why we want to do it so much.
Yeah, they do, and I'm not. I sort of get why, but I don't. When you really look at the rules, that's the world we live in now. If these PSR rules didn't exist, then I could sort of understand the complaint a bit more. The fact they do exist, as you say, I'll run through the figures quickly, but it shows what a difference it's making in terms of our ability to spend on football, and whether people agree with this or not, it is a fact that our spending has shot up markedly ever since we opened the stadium. So we've gone from spending almost nothing, almost net zero, to hundreds of millions every season, 150 million on average, I think, each season since we've opened up. It is making a difference. We are spending the money we're earning from the stadium, and as you say, it's showing in the revenue. So everyone will have seen the headline figure, which was it's gone up from 440 million odd to 550 million. And as you said, this is as at June last year, so the 3-year cycle that ended in June 23. Champions League made up about 65 million of that, so obviously Champions League is helpful between the prize money and the TV money, but even take that away, you're still around the 500 million mark. It put us around 8th globally, so we're behind your big clubs like your Madrids and your Barças and your PSGs and Bayerns, Man City with their iffy revenues, but yeah, we're ahead of some of our rivals now, and most of the Premier League. So in terms of, I think it was United and Arsenal got about 25 to 30 million Europa League. So you can maybe half the money we're going to get next year. Mm-hmm. But to sort of compensate from that, our commercial revenue is way up. So commercial revenue went up. I think it's our biggest revenue stream now. So for all the money we bring in, we get most of it, not from Premier League TV deals and not from our stuff, but from our commercial revenue. So that includes our events, our sponsorship, and our merchandise. So that's where we're getting the majority of our money come through the door. And the other income, they call it, which is the stadium events, has climbed the most of all of those revenue streams. So that was up 74% from around 30 million to 55. So all the revenues are looking good. They're all flying up. The thing we do need is to get back in the Champions League and stay in there, because that will keep us above the sort of £500 million revenue mark.
Got it. Okay. So, and when you say this and the commercial income you're breaking up there, does that mean that is it shirt sales? Is it that kind of area that's really bumping up the figures as well?
Yeah, it's the sponsorships, the shirt sales. I think we're a bit up, but fairly steady. Yeah, the big climber was the stadium events, basically the other income, which, as you say, is why we're applying for. Is it 36 events they've applied for now to increase the number? So if we get that and we can host another 10, 15 events every year, that's, it depends on the nature of the agreement. Normally we get a straight fee, and then we get a cut of the money that's raised on the day through the bars and the food and things like that. So NFL, we make a lot of money. Concerts, we make a decent amount, and then football, we make 4 to 5 million a game. So yeah, if we can just keep that stadium open and hosting events all year, including football, we're going to be insulated from not being in the Champions League, or we can spend all that extra money that other clubs just don't make.
Yeah, someone put numbers together. I think it was Kieran Maguire, and he said roughly, very roughly, we make £3 million per event in revenue. Now, to calculate the profit to us is difficult, but he said very, very roughly speaking, you're talking £1 million in food and beverage, £1 million in commercial sales, and £1 million in tickets if you separate the tickets. So that was kind of roughly what we were getting per game using the stadium. So you could do the math very quickly that the Champions League is, on average, you're going to get about 60 million a season. You only need 20 days a year around the football to rent that stadium out to bridge that whole gap. Yeah. And if we get to 50, 60, 70 games, suddenly other clubs looking at you and going, hey, that's not fair. You're getting £180 million a season, and you're not just from using a stadium as a concert. But that's the long-term planning and vision. I assume that's what Daniel is pushing towards here.
Yeah, and that's why we're, as a club, keen on PSR, not being infringed upon, because we're in a strong position finally. After all these years of building the stadium and selling our best players and reinvesting all the stuff that Newcastle and Villa are moaning about now. We've had 20 years of that, and we're finally there, and we're finally in a good position, seen as a cartel member, and suddenly PSR's under threat, which would be slightly frustrating, but very Spurs, I guess.
It's the cartel topic I find hilarious, because it was the Big Six cartel, and then there was like, wait a second, you're calling us the Big Six cartel, and it's now a Big Seven with Newcastle, and 3 of those clubs want it removed. So that's not a cartel.
Not really a cartel, is it? Yeah.
And 2 of those 3 clubs have won 8 of the last 10 titles. So you guys are punching down here in Chelsea and City. It's not a red cartel. And then they went, it's the red cartel. It's Liverpool, Man U. You say, no, the Premier League rules are it has to be a 2/3 majority to vote in or out decision. So if 2/3 of the division are voting something in, that's not just Liverpool, Man United.
No, it's not 3 clubs driving it, exactly.
Yeah, it's not them driving it. I see more of a blue cartel in that you've got Chelsea and City lobbying for a change that the majority don't want, and they've won 8 of the last 10 titles, and they're swinging downwards and outspending everyone.
Yeah. The audacity of Man City to claim they do it for the good of football is just like, I don't know how they can do that with a straight face. And then you got Everton fans defending them and saying, go on City for the good of football. But you just think I just don't. Turkey's voting for Christmas. It's not going to put Everton in any better position they're in now, is it?
No, exactly. It's kind of like I don't know a good analogy off the top of my head, but what Everton want the Premier League to suffer out of revenge for a circumstance which is different. And I get why they want it. You can see why, in a way, that FFP and PSR does need a bit of a reform, because it doesn't help a club like Everton get out of their financial difficulties by giving them point deductions and potentially relegating them. And that's what PSR, profit and sustainability regulation, was designed to do, was to curb these owners' silly spending and ensure those clubs survive through those periods. But it's a bit hypocritical to say, we are going to curb the spending, and we're also going to relegate you, and your revenue's going to fall through the floor for doing so.
Exactly. Yeah, it could definitely do with tweaking. They're far from perfect, but they're a bit of a shield between the silly spending that almost saw your Blackburns and your Leeds and your Portsmouths go bankrupt, because, as you say, these owners will commit the clubs to long contracts and big wages, and then they'll sometimes turn the taps off. And unfortunately, something needs to be in place to prevent that from happening.
And this is again, why, and I get why Newcastle fans want them just ripped off and go sign Mbappe, job done. But there is a reality that you don't know what's going to change in the political landscape. We saw what happened with Abramovich and Chelsea.
And the Chinese investment as well, that dried up quite quickly.
Completely. So if I think Newcastle revenue is something like 250 million, if they go and spend in line with Spurs, which they over the last 3 years they've outspent us, you're saying, right, you're spending on line with a club with double your revenue. Let's just say there's a political shift and your owners, which, oh, by the way, actually, they're technically not related to the Saudi government at all, are they? Of course.
No.
Even though we all know they are.
Definitely
So if that just changes tomorrow for whatever reason, or we have a fallout as countries or whatever it is, your club will potentially cease to exist. It could go into liquidation through this callous spending. So there's a compromise here. It's saying it's there, and this is going into the kind of the background of why it exists. PSR is there to find that balance of allowing you to grow and use your money, but in a way that ensures you're forced to grow the revenue your club generates organically alongside that.
Yeah.
But people just don't want to wait for the two things to align.
No, they don't want to wait. The owners don't want. The owners are the worst ones, aren't they? They're not interested in waiting and investing in the club. They don't care if Newcastle left with 100,000 seater stadium with great revenue. They just want to be winning stuff and sports wash and get their name out there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're not interested in that long term investment, and that's where the fans don't quite sometimes see it for what it is, I think.
Yeah. So on this topic of investment and spending and Spurs, as we dive into us a bit more specifically, our wages are often an area we get both praise and criticism for, because our wages to turnover, last time I checked, I think they were 57% of our turnover, and our rivals tend to spend in the mid-60s, and the Man United's above 70 at times. Everton, and as an example, were in the 90s at one point when they started to fail PSR regulation. Those years
they were
back.
at 97% a few years back, which is just madness.
Incredible, isn't it? Imagine running an organisation where the wages are as much as it generates even before taking all your costs of goods sold out. It's just insane. But on the Spurs, so is there room for Spurs to spend more on wages then, do you believe, looking at figures?
Yeah, I think so. And we'll get into the sort of what we could spend on the combined wage and transfers sort of headlines in it. But yeah, as you say, wage bill, it's going up, or at least it was. We've obviously just lost Kane, and Ndombele hopefully looks like he might be on his way. Perisic was a high earner, Lloris was a high earner, so they'll probably dip back down again. But the wage bill had gone up 20% year on year to last year, which surprises quite a few people. But because we are spending more in the transfer market, obviously that comes with wages, and it's increased over 100 million in the last 5 years. So again, since the stadium's opened, our wage bill has flown up. It's almost doubled since the stadium opened. It's the biggest growth in the top six quite comfortably. So we did have room to catch up, and people point that out, and they're not wrong to point that out. And we still do have room to catch up because we actually dipped below Arsenal's wages last June, but that will have very quickly reversed, as I say, because of our players that have left, and they've brought on Rice, Havertz, people like that since.
Yeah.
So and they've got some renewals, Saka and people like that. So yeah, theirs will have gone back above ours now. But we're not that far behind Arsenal. As you say, we're around the 50% mark, I think, at the moment, ratio turnover. So I think, and this is not my work. This is you mentioned Kieran Maguire earlier. He does. Obviously, it's recommend anyone going and subscribing to that podcast. That's one of the ones I listen to every week. And yeah, I think they had us at somewhere between 47 and 50%. Which is very good. I think we're the lowest in the league, and plenty of room to grow. Whereas, as you say, Villa are up in the 90%. Chelsea, I think, are 70 to 80%, something like that. And Arsenal are in the 50s. So yeah, we're well placed to spend more, both on transfers and wages, I think.
And combine that with that, when I look at Arsenal's wages being on par or a bit more than ours now, I said in the next accounts will be more than ours. When you look at their squad, there's very little deadwood in there. So that's a very efficient wage bill, if that makes sense. All those players on that wage bill are being utilised and contributing to the team. But when you look at ours, we've got Brian Hill, Højbjerg, Lo Celso, Ndombele, Reguilon, Rodon, Royale, Sessegnon, Solomon, Spence, and Tanganga.
Yeah.
And Ndombele, if I mentioned him already, who's on big wages, over 200 grand a week. We actually, when we look at 57%, you get rid of those players. Suddenly, we're looking incredibly healthy this window.
Yeah.
And that might correlate with the rumours we're going to terminate or find a mutual agreement with Ndombele's wages, example, before June 30th. It might be just... My assumption here is we're doing that so that we get that ratio as low as we can, and we're readying ourselves up for future spending by getting under the new rules needing to only be able to spend 70% of your turnover. We're trying to lower that wage bracket as much as we can, which is the biggest contributor to that cost, so that we have more to spend on transfers and take advantage of the other clubs who are suddenly going, I need to sell to get in line here, and we'll be best placed to take advantage.
And that's the thing people miss sometimes is it might sound like an obvious point, but the wages make more of a difference than the transfers, because you can amortize the transfer spend over the life of the contract. It's not going to make a huge difference to your profit and loss each year. Whereas if you rack up wages, they very quickly, like say our wage bill's in the sort of 250 million mark. You take Ndombele out, that's 10 million gone. Yeah, Kane is another 10 million gone every year, and quite quickly you're down from 250 million to 200 million just on players, as you say, we don't even want at the club. So Kane we did, obviously, but the rest of them, it says quite a lot that you need to take a breath in between the long list of players that we've got to move on still, because we're earlier in that process, aren't we? Whereas Arsenal are 4 or 5 years down the line under Arteta, and they've been able to go through that process of moving on all their unwanted players, and we're 12 months or maybe 18 months in, and yeah, there's still quite a long way to go, I think.
Yeah, and it's quite an outdated perception that I think we all have as fans, where it's often the league table of who spends the most money every transfer window, and it's like, why do we always leave wages out of that graph? Because there's only a correlation between wage spend and success. There's not a clear correlation between transfer spend and success. So people have done that research, and they go, oh, look at Man City, £50 million for Haaland. What a bargain. I'm sorry, but that's a clear bargain. Anyone in the world would have signed that player. Well, anyone in the top 8 of the Premier League would have signed him if they could afford £500,000 a week in salary, a £40 million such fee. And they could have also afforded to pay Pep Guardiola insane amounts of money and give that player the opportunity to play for Pep. It's just such a different landscape, whereas we are kind of in this awkward realm of we can't beat City to players and Real Madrid to players, but we can beat the challenges to the Aston Villas and the Evertons to players. And we're always trying to find that sweet spot, which seems to be landing at the moment about the £40 million transfer spend and around £100,000 a week in wages seems to be where we're settling under Ange as maybe our area.
Default target, yeah, and that's where it's sometimes frustrating when people, like, we all want to win more trophies, but when people demand trophies, say, right, we have to win one this year. I think it's you've got to step back and look at the wider picture, and we could spend every single penny we earn, and we would still get nowhere near what Man City could spend or what Man United could spend, because they just make more money. And under PSR, this is what Aston Villa and Newcastle are saying, is it's hard to catch up, but we cannot outspend them, so we have to be smarter. And for the last 5 years, or much of it, we haven't been smarter. We've been bouncing around managers and signing players that haven't worked out and things like that. So we need to just spending smart is always going to be much better than spending big, and ideally it's both. We've started to spend a lot better, and if we can keep that going, then the 40 to 60 million pounds transfer mark, you can get some fantastic players, as we've seen. So yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with what we're targeting, as long as we're sort of getting it right, and we're still spending 150, 200 million every summer. I think it will very, very quickly look a lot better.
Yeah, it feels like we have the ability. You know how Crystal Palace is seen as this stepping stone club, and they're amazing at getting really talented young players, because those players know they're going there as a step, and Palace go, that's fine. We'll play good football, make you a part of it, and we'll give you a release clause that enables you to make that step out when the time's right. Spurs are almost the stepping stone above that stepping stone to a Real Madrid, a PSG, and a Man City, whether we like it or not. And we've tried to shift that in recent years. You've seen us cling on to Son, even though he made it easy for us. But Kane is probably a better example of saying, don't care if you want him, Man City, you're not having him. And we've really tried to play in that pond. And it is positive to see us being able to beat Bayern Munich to a signing and keep these players. And maybe it is a sign that we're moving away from that stepping stone area with this extra income we're getting from other areas that enables us to retain players and show them we can continue to spend and build a squad around you here, which is quite exciting, absolutely. I think, for our future with Ange.
Yeah, I think so.
So on that, where do you think we might stand from a spending ability perspective based on our figures last year?
I tried to sort of work through to give a bit of a finger in the air. The caveat's going to be, obviously, there's a bit of guesswork involved in this, because we've got the reported figures from the 3-year cycle ending in June, but we don't have, the figures for this year yet. So we've got to make a few guesses. But if I walk through my thinking of it, and feel free to jump in at any point. So 3-year cycle to June 23, we lost around 230 million. But we had 258 million of allowable deductions. So we could take off things like Corona estimated losses from the 2021 season, which we estimate at 75 million. We could take off things like infrastructure spending, so all our stadium spends, youth academy spending, that sort of stuff. So we basically deducted 258 million off of that loss, which gave us a profit of nearly 100 million from a PSR perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our position, and you're obviously about to make a loss. So given we were 100 million up in the eyes of PSR, plus the loss, we actually had about 200 million worth of room. The caveat to that being that isn't saying you can spend 200 million, that's saying you could make 200 million more losses in that period and you would still have been fine for PSR. So that was the sort of position last June. Then we come into this period, so this new 3-year cycle, the COVID losses disappears, so you've got to take away that, we can't have that 75 million of allowable deductions anymore. Champions League goes, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm thinking Kane, let's just say that nets off, sort of. So you keep things roughly the same. You take away that 75 million that we would have been able to deduct, and then also you increase our amortization bill. So the players we bought after June last year, and I made that out to be Johnson, Dragazin, Van der Ven, Veliz, Vicario, around 130 million. So you amortize that over 5 years, that's a cost of about 25 million a year. So for all of those things in the mix, you are, and I'm not expecting people to have followed that exactly, but you're somewhere around the previous buffer being 200 million more losses. You're probably somewhere around 100 to 120 million ish in the buffer. Yeah. Obviously, caveats of I don't know how the wages have moved. I don't know how the specifically where they've amortized over the full 5 years, that sort of thing. But I reckon we could make 100 to 120 million more of a loss than we did last year. So you could, providing the revenues are flat, roughly flat, you could spend the same amount as we did last year, plus quite a bit more, because, as we say, all the spending doesn't come off your bill straight away. It doesn't go as a loss straight away. It goes as an amortized bill over 4 or 5 years.
So if there's, assuming we have an average of 4-year amortization, you're talking stretching 400 million worth of fees, technically. But then you're not including wages in that.
You're not including wages, which is the big thing that people miss. So what people do is say, "Oh, well, if we've got the ability to spend, let's say 200 million or lose 200 million plus all of that transfer spend, the amortized spend, we could spend 600-800 million," which isn't the case, because if we did that, we'd go bankrupt, because the wages and all the other signing on fees, the agent fees, things like that aren't factored into that, and they do come off the bill straight away. So I think we would be fine if we went out and spent 300 million. I don't think we would be in trouble from a PSR perspective, but I do think we would then be tighter for the next 2 or 3 years, because suddenly your amortization bill goes right up, your wages go right up, and your revenue will climb, but it probably won't climb quite in proportion. So there's nothing to stop us, I think, spending a few hundred million. What I think is more likely is we'll probably spend from 50 to 200 million or commit to that amount in new fees, and maybe plus anything we sell. So you might be talking 200 to 250, which would be roughly in line with what we spent or committed to this season. I think it was 270 million euros gross.
I think it was. It was still 140, I think, even after Kane's sale, the net spell, wasn't it? Yeah. And I'm roughly calculating it. If we got 10 million for Brandhill, 20 million for Højbjerg, 15 million for Lo Celso.
Yeah, Royale, maybe another 15.
Yeah, Royale, Reguilon 5, Royale 15, Sessegnon nothing. Skip, if he did go, I'm not saying a lot of people want to keep him, but I'm just saying hypothetically, he wants to go, some rumours say we got 15 million for him, lowballing it, 8 for Spence and 5 for Solomon, and Tanganga, actually we haven't got a fee for him, have we? But that's still 105 million in recoup transfer fees.
You give yourself half of that, 50 million on top. 150 million net spend, you're talking 200 million gross, which is, a decent budget. Not many people spend more than 200 million gross in a window. So I think there's room to spend a decent amount in this window.
Yeah. And we've factored as well, because I've also got these, and people listening, you've probably just seen the Sensible Transfers pod we've done, which took into account the homegrown issues we've got, club-grown issues, etc. But basically what that came out of the wash as, we are probably going to end up signing this window, only a max we could fit in would be 3 more non-homegrown players and 2 homegrown players. So we're looking at 5 signings this summer, a rough budget of 200 to 250 million to spend. So it could be an exciting window where we're looking at 5 £50 million circa signings, and then a couple of youth players we've never heard of, and Ashley Phillips again, someone like that, coming in as we build that for the financial fair play benefits of as well, taking those young academy players which don't go against those limits coming in that might have a resale value in future coming in too. So it does set us up quite nicely to I think their vision is probably that gets us back into that top 4 bracket again. You're playing good football, you're looking like a really strong side, and then you're going into the following summer going, every position has 1 or 2 very good players in now. Do we do that Declan Rice type thing where we just go all in on 1 or 2 positions? And people often ask, why don't we do that? Why do Spurs never go for the Rice? And I think, the Rice kind of signing, or whoever it is, that one massive name that's going to make the difference. But we are 5 or 6 positions short on the pitch. To go after one position is the wrong time. Arsenal filled all of their gaps, said this is a really solid team. Now let's start putting a few elite players in certain positions. And I think we're a year away from that. But we're still 5 Mickey van der Ven type signings in different positions. That squad is looking very, very juicy.
Clone Mickey van der Ven and we'll be fine. Just get him all over the pitch. Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. And I've seen people say throw the entire budget at Alexander Isak. And he's a very good striker and he would make a big difference. But as you say, I just don't think we're in that position yet. I think we saw what Arsenal did, and people reference Rice, but they went 4 years or 3 years, 3 summers with all of their signings were in that 30 to 50 to 60 million pound bracket. They were your Ben Whites and your Odegaards and just all of them in that lower bracket where they weren't seen as superstars. They were sort of good players and exactly the type of players we're signing. And people hate the word process, but they went through that process. They cleared out the players they didn't want. They filled the squad with, a decent quality 2 players for every position. And then, as you say, 75 million Havertz, 110 million, whatever it was, on Rice, and then brought in Timber as well. So that's what we want to do, is get that to-do list to be nice and short, and then we can really concentrate the funds, I think, into 2 or 3 players. Yeah,
agree. So it's exciting times ahead. I'm really excited for it. If we get a transfer window with 5 £50 million pound-players, I think we've had a great window. And the brilliant thing about our model is we are able to do that window after window, permitted. Yeah. This is where the point of investment comes, though, and the importance of it. Why Daniel Levy will be seeking that is, it's all well and good. It's good saying, good, you can lose another £200 million this year. Go and lose it. He does want a return on this at some point, and I know he bought it for. Was it only £30 million or roughly Spurs?
Yeah,
and it's valued. Yeah, and it's worth in the billions comfortably now. But if he's scoring 200 million a year in losses down to get a return back when he eventually sells the club completely, he's burning through his future profit quite aggressively at this rate, chasing that growth and betting on the asset appreciating of Premier League, and football continues to grow. So at some point he will say, I need a cash-rich hand in here. That's going to take some of that investment away, but also someone who actually has the cash to do this, because Daniel Levy is your classic rich man on paper. But I imagine if you had his PIN code to his card, you'd be going, where's all the money, Daniel? You've got a lot of money in there, but it's not enough to go and buy a Premier League footballer in today's transfer market with your own money. Where is it? And he's going, well, it's in stocks, assets, stadium, loans, leveraging debt across various things. On paper, I'm rich. I'm not rich I am rich
until you actually realise it by selling your shares. Yeah, exactly. So at some point, he's going to want that profit in his pocket. Yeah, people, Daniel Levy pocketing the profits. He cannot do that. It's not. You can't just take money out of the club. So he has to sell his shares before he can do that. And yes, he's very well paid and he gets great bonuses and things like that. But he's not going to realise any of this. What does he own in ENIC? Is it 30% and they own 85%? So I haven't done the maths, but he's in line to be probably close to a billionaire. But for now, he's probably worth, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 million. I don't know what he's worth, but it's nothing near what he will be worth once he sells those shares.
Oh, exactly. He's not in the super yacht territory.
No.
He's in the beautiful vineyard somewhere territory.
He's probably got a couple of nice holiday homes, I'd imagine. But he's not hard up.
Yeah. No, that's so. In terms of what kind of investment we might be looking for, do you think he's going to be? Because we were linked to, it was squashed, but a kind of generic American sporting, I think it's American
MSP,
MSP investment group. Like, or are we looking for? Because those businesses, right? They're also looking for a profit out of this at some point. What do you think is the ideal kind of investment? Because people always argue about this. Do we want?
Yeah, it's a really hard one, isn't it? Because I don't want. I mean, everyone's got their own sort of where they're on the scale. I wouldn't want anyone like a Saudi anywhere near our club. I wouldn't want to be there as a sports washing. The sad reality is they're the ones that are happy to make, push it all the way up to your PSR limits and make £300 million a year losses purely to make sure they're successful on the pitch. So some fans will say, don't care, let's get that in. But I wouldn't really want to be associated with regimes like that at Spurs, because I think that I don't want a moral dilemma when it comes to supporting Spurs, if you know what I mean. So I mean, if all you want is the success and you're happy to turn a blind eye to the rest of the stuff, you probably do want a nation state to come in and buy it outright and say, right, we're writing off all the stadium debt. Here's the money for that, and every single penny now is going to go straight into players and wages all the way up to the PSR limits, and you probably will reach success more quickly that way on the field, but maybe at what cost? Yeah, the private equity ones do worry me a bit, because you get like FSG have done well at Liverpool. Some Liverpool fans moan about them, but they make smart decisions and they bring in the right people and they've got a clear structure, and it's brought them from sort of 7th, 8th all the way into Champions League winners and Premier League winners. So yeah, I think you can get good ones, but then some of them, there are so many examples where they're not so good. So it's a real difficult one in terms of what the ideal would be, and I think it's a real be careful what you wish for scenario, because okay, we all have our frustrations with Levy and ENIC, but it could be a lot worse. I think you could get someone like the Glazers who just want to take the dividends, which you don't do. You could get someone who is just terrible at it. All right, we've not always been great at it, but you could get someone that's a lot worse at running the football club, and you've got an Everton Mashiri style thing where they just get you into trouble and you get in dock points and things like that. So yeah, I don't know what the ideal is actually. It's a good question.
Is there a world where there is a Middle Eastern investor who's not interested in sports washing? They're just a billionaire who just loves Spurs and just goes...
Singapore was mentioned, actually, and that falls into that bracket. There was someone in Singapore who was a billionaire who just wanted to own a football club to... Yeah, so I think there is someone out there. There are people out there like that. You have a board multi-billionaire who just wants to have a successful football club for 10 years or something.
But even... It's crazy, isn't it? Because it used to be a sport when you go back 50 years where ex-players and stuff were put upstairs and they were a part of the investment and they could make a big difference to a club. So then it became a millionaire's playhouse shortly after, about 40 years ago. Then it became like, this isn't where millionaires play. They play in League One and League Two. This is where billionaires play. And the billionaires club, Abramovich comes in, and it became a state-owned trillionaires club. And you're going, Jim Ratcliffe's coming in, and he can't, even if he wants to throw every penny he's got at this, he would run out of money going gun-ho.
Yeah, and he's Britain's richest man, is he?
Richest man.
Yeah. It's insane.
Such a small pond of people that can fish.
That's the problem. You need Jeff Bezos or what's her name? Elon Musk, God forbid. Someone who's like just got money to burn and is just happy to have this plaything and have Google or whoever it is sponsor the stadium and things like that. So I think there are good scenarios out there where they invest and they buy the club and they say, right, here's some good football guys, you run this for me, I just want to see success, and that would be great. But yeah, I think it's until we see what comes forward. Like MSP, I was wary of those rumours. I wasn't entirely sold that would be a good thing. But yeah, it's hard to know until they actually do it and you see how they set us up.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it just depends what you want, and I don't think like we can get too wound up about it as fans, because it's so out of our control. Like, it's so far-reaching. Well, I guess you could argue that we have an influence to the point of we could protest and unite against a certain type of owner and maybe have a chance of making a difference. But even then, I'm not sure we could, because we are unfortunately getting to not unfortunately, international sport is wonderful, but as you and I, as UK-based local Tottenham fans, are becoming less and less relevant to the bigger picture as the brand grows globally. So us being on the streets saying we care about the specific postcode it's in England, a lot of other people are going, I really don't care. Like I'm not from England. I just like Tottenham and I want to just watch them succeed. And however we get there, great. I'm really not all about the politics behind it.
Yeah.
But
and the international merchandise revenue is higher, the TV revenue is growing, and well, I don't know if it's higher already or it will be. So it's all the money is coming, and as you'd expect, we're not a huge country. Most of the money comes from outside of the UK. So it does seem like it's going in that direction where they're already FIFA looking at rules now, aren't they, to play games in America. We've got pre-season tours in Australia, which I think it's nice for those fans to have a chance to see the team, but there is a risk that it's going to water down possibly the product as it is.
Yeah, and there's also the fear of more changes coming. Some clubs have identified that, well, all owners now realise season ticket holders are your least profitable match goer now, whereas there used to be a guarantee of filling up the stadium in advance of a season, at least with tickets sold, even if someone didn't go to the game. Now they know it's going to be sold out regardless, but if it's a fan visiting 2 or 3 times a year, they're going to go into the club shop and spend more money. They're going to enjoy the drinks more. They're going to make more of the day as it's unique. They're going to go do the stadium tour. They're going to go do the sky walk. Season ticket holders, we go with a sandwich in our pocket. Go to the Bricklayers.
The route straight in, local pub.
So I think Kieran McGuire's there is analysis going on and gentle whispers, and people are actually missing it quite a lot, which is a threat to all season ticket holders across the Premier League, of clubs looking at slowly phasing out season ticket holders over time. And they're starting to do that with, you have to have a minimum attendance a year, otherwise your ticket's revoked. There's probably going to be more premiums and taxes. They're not going to be doing things to encourage you to financially stay on as a season ticket holder.
Concessions are disappearing.
Concessions are going. So you have to watch this space. I think just really, although I don't mind the idea of being able to have a bit more flexibility and going halves and halves on a season ticket. In the time of my life, I've got family, and maybe you're in a similar situation.
Yeah, I'm the same. I barely ever get down there at the moment because it's 2 young kids. So it's I couldn't afford one if I wanted one at the moment. So it's it's one of those things. I don't mind the idea of the flexibility, but I do think it erodes maybe things like, I know there's complaints around atmosphere and things like that, because maybe if you're a person who just comes once or twice a season, maybe you don't know the chants, maybe you don't know maybe you are looking around taking photos and things like that. I do understand that it comes with drawbacks. So I get why people don't like that's happening. Even though it doesn't personally affect me, and it would actually almost benefit me in terms of I'll probably get to more games if there were more day tickets available. But I can definitely see the arguments against it.
Yeah. But we'll wrap up there. I think it's been a really, really good chat, Ben. And if you want to, what's your Twitter handle again, top of your head?
I don't know. I think it's Ben W00 something. I don't even know.
I'll tag you when I tweet it out.
W0086. There we go.
Ben, I'll tag you in that as well, and we announce the pod. But it's been lovely chatting to you. You've probably heard Ben before on the Fighting Cock and other shows. But it's been great having
me on.
Ben.
Yeah, it's been good.
Thanks. Well, up the Spurs.
Yeah, go on you Spurs.